Right, so we're going to kickstart this one anyway. We'll be uploading this to YouTube after as well, but thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be looking at a bit of an overview of essentially the CYP range, having a look at all of the sorts of things that we do, and some of the things maybe people aren't aware of, other things might be just regular day-to-day products. My name's Dan, I'm Key Account Manager for CYP UK and Europe, and with me is Kevin Cray. Hi, Kev.
Good afternoon.
Welcome aboard. Kevin is our
technical
development director.
New product development director.
Director. We need a brief. What are you, a PDDT or something? I'm gonna go with that. Something like that.
Some kind of abbreviation for it,
There's some sort of letters in there.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's kick on with this session. So, if you're not aware already, CYP are known for a wide range of products, mostly around signal distribution and signal management. And you'll see here that includes AV over IP, HDMI and HDBaseT matrices, extender kits, audio products, switches, converters, signal management, and HDMI cabling. And today we're going to look at a little bit of most of them. So let's have a quick look at CYP. So obviously we're well known for delivering market-leading connectivity solutions. I'm reading that bit off screen there. We're continually developing new products, and at the moment our range includes over 300 products, and we're launching new products every year. It's been quite a lot recently, Kev, haven't there? A lot of really good products coming to market.
Yeah, exactly. It's always interesting what we're developing and how we're developing, and obviously we do like to get feedback on that as well.
Exactly right. And as we've mentioned on here as well, we're one of few brands that can offer a full customization of hardware and firmware depending on the application and the situation. So
we actually design and manufacture all our products.
Exactly right.
Incredibly rare for an AV company.
And today we'll be discussing all the sort of off-the-shelf products, but there are lots that we can do as well that are based around similar products, but built to meet certain specifications.
There's too many of them really to do in one session, so we've broken this into two parts. So this would be part one.
Exactly right. Exactly right. You are right. There are a lot of them. We'll go through. I'll cover this page and then I'll let Kev do the next ones. But we'll quickly explain the model numbers and what they mean. So a lot of our products start with AU, which, as you can see here, is something to do with audio, either converters, de-embedders, embedders, switches, but audio products. OR, which is our matrix range, so something orbiting around a system, orbit OR. PU and PUV, we cover a little bit more, but that's based on the word puma, meaning cat. So basically signals over cat. Again, we cover that a little bit later today. IP, we've got a lot of products now that are based around AV over IP, or also now as well, some of our IP products are streaming or capture products. EL, elector, to select something. We have a lot of switches and presentation switches that are EL model numbers. QU, quantum, as in equal lots, quantum bits. So that's our splitters. Yeah, lots of splitters. And then SY, which is synergy of more than one part, more than one thing. So that would be the likes of scaling and signal conversion. I'll let you do the next page if you like, Kev. Here we are. I'll bring them up. You reel them off.
RE, so that's products that relay. So a relay, as in a race relay, so it extends or relays signal, both audio and video, and sort of data as well. You can have some data sort of relay products in there as well. And the XA there, so they're the examiner sort of. So they are all the products that will have pattern generators or analyzers, or do a particular functionality that's useful for solving signal issues within a signal path. And then Pro, so these are there is a small range of SDI, and the Pro range also includes our closed fiber system, so point-to-point fiber connectivity systems. These are very useful when you just need point-to-point systems and you don't want to go to the expense or don't need to go to the higher bandwidth specifications of SDVoE. And then we have the SDVoE themselves. So software-defined video over Ethernet. So this is the highest quality and highest bandwidth 10 gig IT systems based on 10 gig network switching. So there's lots of these that are out now, and we're building this range up. It's one of the range that's going to grow throughout this year. We'll see some new products coming through within this range. And then finally, or perhaps finally, the digital signage system, the DS. So these are video wall controllers and the like. So again, if you're not purchasing dedicated video wall screens, because often they can be a lot more expensive than their standalone equivalents, then you can use our DS range to control that and build video walls and such like.
Exactly right. There we go. So that's the sort of prefixes for them. So as I say, this is an overview today. So we're not going to go really in depth on any one range. We're just going to cover it so that everybody can see the wide range of products that we do. So let's start off with AU products, as in audio-based products. You can see on the left there, amplifiers, converters, etc. We'll have a quick look here. So you can see some of the audio amplifiers in our range. These are mostly small format zone amplifiers, something like this, for example, the AUA220, which is a little 2-channel 20-watt stereo amplifier, really easy to mount somewhere because it's very, very small. This fits into our RAX 300 series of racking equipment as well. So that's the little AUA220.
Yeah, that's probably the most popular one these days, isn't it? It's been out for a couple of years, but it really does sell well because it's quite a small little unit. So it allows a lot of flexibility for where you need it. I mean, I've often had installers in commercial environments where they've got ceiling speakers actually popping them up into the ceiling and onto the ceiling, and then just running the speakers across to them and using the RS232, I think it is, for control.
Simple. Yeah, a really, really good option. Moving down, you've then got the AUA 300 and the AUA 300 HBT, which gives us another moment to speak about models. Our models, eventually, they do make sense. HBT, of course, then is linked to the fact that this version of the amplifier has HDBaseT connectivity of some sort. We'll look at this one in depth in a second. And then at the bottom there, the AUA 50, which again is just then a stereo zone amplifier.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that all our amplifiers are stereo amplifiers. We don't do any multi-channel amplification. But of course, if you've got if you're decoding into LPCM, you could of course use multiple units, sending in the decoded LPCM multi-channels into different stereo amplifiers.
Good stuff. Let's have a look. We just picked one at random here just to show you some of the options. So this zone amplifier, as you can see on screen here, has the cat in and out. So you can effectively come from a transmitter of some sort into this zone amplifier. Of course, then you could run audio locally, but you can then daisy chain that out with the cat output to another area. And again, you'll see there's HDMI in and out. And also then you've got the various audio options on there. Any other key points you want to cover on this one, Kev?
These are good for creating sub-zones, sub-audio zones, or sub-audio and video zones within an HDBaseT system. Primarily, these are more commercial products, so where you're putting in commercial installations and you want sound reinforcement in multiple areas. They allow you to go in and out. You can also bridge the amplifiers, so you can either choose to have one amplifier that controls the level for all of them, or you can have them independently controllable from their web GUI, RS232 or Telnet commands.
Fantastic, fantastic. Moving on, we've then got a wide range of converters. Again, we're not going to cover all of them because there are lots, but we've just chosen a few examples here. So something like the AUD3192 at the top there, just a really simple coax or optical converter to stereo analog. So this is an incredibly popular model, isn't it still, Kev? Just for
yeah. So these are just ADCs and DACs of various orders and various configurations there. And as you can see, there's a few Dolby licensed products as well. So all of our products that are able to decode multi-channel are all fully licensed through Dolby and DTS. You can always tell a fully licensed product from these manufacturers or from these codex creators, I suppose, because they should have the Dolby Digital and all the DTS logo physically on the unit. So if you're viewing something that says it does it and it hasn't got that, then it's not actually licensed, and at some point it could actually stop working. So remember to check for that when you're getting anything that's Dolby or DCS converting.
Good point. Very good point indeed. We will just then have a quick look through these. Again, you can see you've got coax to optical converters. Basically, within the range, you'll probably find the right converter for whichever scenario you're looking for, because there are so many of them. And just a simple example here again of that AUD3192, that's a coaxial or optical input, and then obviously just stereo RCA output. An item that's not actually listed here that we've had a lot of interest in recently is one that supports ARC as well. So if you need to bring ARC back from your screen, that's a good one, isn't it, Kev?
Yeah, there's a couple that do that. There's a simple one where you just connect the ARC from the TV to the unit, and then it has a stereo left and right output. But that's very clever because it has the CEC command infrastructure. So your television thinks it's an AVR, and then as long as it's got the relevant compatibility, and most of the ones we've tested do, and all the major manufacturers do, you can use your TV to remote for volume up and downing.
Fantastic. That's a great feature.
Yeah.
Let's skip through that. We've covered that, no problem. Of course, then embedders and de-embedders. So again, this is a good time to speak about some of our model numbers. There is logic behind some of these. So you look here, you've got at the top there the AU11CA, which is an audio embedder. So obviously embedding an audio signal into your HDMI path. And then below that is the AU11CA 4K22. In our range of models, if you see the 4K22 on the end of the model number, means that it supports 4K and HDCP 2.2. So again, there is full logic behind that part of the model number.
Indeed.
Moving down, you've then got an audio embedder, which is then the AU11CD, and also then, same again, it has the 4K22 counterpart. You will actually see as well, there's a significant difference between the casings of the 4K22 models and the non-4K22 models. These are sort of a plastic housing. Then the 4K22 models are again compatible with our RAC 300 racking system and are actually then a metal housing. So
you'll
quite
see
significant difference.
Products in the last few years and continuing now are either that sort of size of those 11 CD 4K22s or a little bit wider. And these, as Dan is mentioning, are designed to go into our RAC 300 and RAC 600 15 slot rack house units, the way you can put PSUs, so multi-channel PSUs in there, so you can put a PSU in there, you can put fans in there if you're not in an air-conditioned environment. So they allowed you to build lots of CYP products into a single rack housing, or in fact you can get blank trays with it as well. So if you want to attach a non-CYP product or a CYP product that isn't actually that size, you can do that as well with a blanking tray and some simple cable tie.
Exactly right, exactly right. And let's move through. You'll see an example here of one of the audio de-embedders, which is then the AU11CD 4K22, just obviously a schematic there. All of these sort of images are available on our website as well. So if ever in doubt, there's a full listing on the CYP website.
Absolutely.
And again, just an option there for an audio embedder. Typical example here, which we've discussed before. I might just actually move to another room. How professional is that, as there's drilling in the room next door? That's the joys of working from home. So this AU11, yeah, AU11CA, which is then an audio embedder. Typical example we've used of this is something like maybe a doctor's surgery or somewhere like that where there's a waiting room, and they might want to have the video from something like a news channel just showing the news on screen, but they want the audio from something like a local radio or something like that. So again, that might be when you use an audio embedder.
I mean, they're relatively simple units. The 1.1 is generally configuration of they've got one HDMI in and one HDMI out, giving you an overview, so you can actually, you know, pass the signal through quite nicely, as well as embedding and de-embedding. And then you've got various analog and digital outputs or inputs depending on the type of device.
Fantastic. Here we go. So we move on now. You've got a range of switchers and splitters. Again, the model numbers, the more you look at them, the more they make sense. So starting from the top there, you've got the AUD12, which is basically a digital splitter. It's a 1 input, 2 output. So that's the AUD 1 in, 2 out, 12. So that's then a 1 to 2 audio splitter. And then below that, you've got the AUD 14 or AUD 14, which is then a 4-way splitter. So obviously 1 input and then 4 outputs. And then the reverse of that is then some of the audio switchers. So AUD 21, as in 2 inputs, 1 output. And then AUD 41, 4 inputs and 1 output. And again, there are more of these in the range. We're just covering a few of them in today's overview.
Indeed.
Have a look at one in real life. Again, multiple inputs. That one's then got the option for remote control, so you can just do the switching from there. But again, very, very simple to use and just all part of that audio conversion and such range.
Yeah, very simple, really. You know, they do what they say. Simple switching. A lot of them based around Toshlink as more and more source and screens are just having that optical output.
And another one we've put in here, which is actually a PU range, even though we're talking about AU, but it is a range of audio products. So these are basically audio over CAT. So the top one there is a really simple point-to-point kit that just comes supplied as a kit, literally a transmitter and receiver, and that will carry the audio up to 150 meters, either from coaxial or from optical, and then the same at the other end.
Yeah, they're very useful. Both of the coaxial and the opticals are live at the same time, but it's only going in one direction. It's only going TX to RX.
Super. Unlike, we'll then move on to these. Do you want to quickly go through the 2 different models here as well?
Yeah, so the BD here stands for bidirectional. So with these units, you've got an in and an out on either side. Whether that's an in is analog and the out's analog, or whether the in's digital, the out's digital, you can mix and match. So you could have analog on one side and digital on the other side, or vice versa. So these are excellent way you want to take video, audio in both directions. So basically, we call them a TX and RX because the TX comes with a power supply and the RX doesn't, but actually they're kind of the same. So you can mix and match. So you could have one at the one side, one at the other side, and you can actually choose as well where you power them. So you could power them at the RX end or at the TX end. It really doesn't matter to the unit. And as I say, they go both directions. So this is quite good when you're in commercial environments and you want to get things both from one location and then back as well. I actually use one of these in my house where I've got my little DJ area. And I send the signal from there back to this room, which is the central control hub of my house, to the amplifier sitting in my rack. But then also I send from here, which has got some, some multi-audio, multi-room stuff in it. It actually sends it back to the mixing desk of my DJ. So when someone walks in my house and they can play anything from their iPhone, I can actually pump it through anywhere into the DJ system as well as around the rest of the house as well. So they're very useful. I mean, they are used more in a commercial environment, but actually if you've got that kind of setup or your customer needs that kind of setup, they really are very versatile, especially because you can choose where you power them, which is really, really useful.
Exactly, and they do then work with some of our higher end HDBaseT matrices as well, don't they?
Yeah, they've got the PUV 1082s have actually got 2 of these, 2 CAT outputs that are these audio CATs. So these top of the range flagship matrices, including the 1082 Pro, the PUV 1082 Pro, have these on them. So you can create multiple audio only zones as well as video zones, and you can have them at distance. Commonly used, these are, the 1082 Pros are commonly used in quite high grade residential properties, and often they have like gyms or swimming pools or wine cellars. I don't know.
Don't we all?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just go down to my wine cellar now. But where you want to get audio to and from. You might not always want video, but you might want audio, so you can get the audio from the system. So these 1082s have multiple analog and digital audio inputs, so they're really designed to be multi-room audio systems as well as multi-room video systems, and using some of the 305s allow you to extend those audio only zones up to 300 meters away via the CAT cable. So really incredibly useful.
Yeah, superb. And yeah, just highlighting exactly as Kev said, the normal BDs are digital, and then the BDA is the analog version. Again, we just put in a simple look here. The 304 kit is incredibly popular still, just as a relatively inexpensive way of sending audio over long distance. That's just standard kit. Or as Kev said, the other ones are then interchangeable.
Perfect.
Let's then look at PU and PUV. So as it says on screen, this is now going away from audio products here. This is going on to a separate range. So PU originally comes from the word puma, as in cat. So this is products that send data signals basically over cat cable. For these, it's mostly audio and video and some data as well. And we'll look here at the difference between the two. So PUV and PU. So PU is the 24 volt system and PUV is the slightly newer 48. I'll leave you with the next bit, Kev, if you're happy with that.
Yeah, no problem. So the PU are slightly older products. When HDBaseT came out, us and lots of other developers looked at how to develop these products. And whilst HDBaseT their preferred choice of POH or POC was 48 volt, because of the type of PoE injectors that we needed to use on these products, there wasn't many 48 volt ones being manufactured, and so the cost of these was really high. So when we first developed HDBaseT products, us along with virtually everybody else I can think of, decided to use 24 volt POC rather than 48 volt POH. This was purely based on the fact that these injectors were very expensive and were putting the price that would put the price of the products up absolutely dramatically, 30–40%, just because you're using a different injector. Now, in an ideal world, we'd have probably used 48 volt from the start, but everybody was new to this, and we needed to make sure that like everybody else, we were in a certain price bracket. Now, obviously, as time's moved on, more and more 48 volt injectors of the right type have been made, so the prices started to come down. So about 3 or 4 years ago, we started developing the 48 volt system, the PUV. This does have some advantages. Obviously, you've got a higher voltage, so there's less amps, so there's less problem or less interference that can be picked up through the cabling, and they're just a little bit better because of that higher voltage. You can have lesser amps, and thus that one pair down the cat cable isn't carrying so much energy that could possibly interfere with the rest of the signal, or more importantly, the data bits of the signal rather than the video and audio. So PUV has subtle advantages. It also, when we developed the PUV range, we wanted to add to this as well. So we added an extra layer of advanced isolating ground isolation. So this allows us to have them more, if they're like floating, they're floating, and so there's a double ground on them for both the electrics and the cat.
Superb, very nice. And as it sort of says there as well, obviously, if you were specifying a project, then you can't mix PU and PUV products. You would follow one or the other, obviously, because of the voltage involved.
Oh, yeah, I always forget the basic thing.
So obviously a quick look at HDBaseT. I'm sure we're all familiar with it, but it's used in a lot of our products because of the fact it can carry audio and video, control signals, Ethernet on certain models, power over cable, as Kev just said, or power over HDBaseT, POH or POC. And you can then use some USB data as well, which would traditionally be HDBaseT2, although, Kev?
Yeah, we are developing some. Obviously, we've been using the VS100 Valence HDBaseT chip for 10+ years now. So, and like we've done on some products before, where we've been able to add extra functionality that's actually beyond the base specification of the chipset, we're working on now being able to get sort of very simple, not that high bandwidth, sort of USB 1.1 kind of bandwidth across HDBaseT1 as well, which will have the advantage of keeping the cost down, because HDBaseT2 chips are a lot more expensive than HDBaseT1. So keep an eye out for some products coming through later in the year that are really designed for education market, and possibly commercial market for interactive touchscreens and projectors, where you've got this USB pathway as well through them.
Exactly. Again, still pushing the boundaries of technology, even when it's older. It's not
Yeah.
just a case of, oh,
Yeah,
that one's old, you know.
they're still a great chip, and you
Mm.
know, if you know what you're doing with them, because as we've been working with them for many years, you can actually get a little bit more out of them than is within the base specification.
Superb. Well, looking at that then, we've got a range of products that include HDBaseT 5-play, which is then sort of the higher end. And that would be covering, obviously, your video, audio, 100BaseT Ethernet. So the 5-play models do have LAN serving. They then have POH, power over HDBaseT, and control signals, all up to 100 meters through a single cat cable. We don't exactly cover cabling today, but obviously we always try and be as realistic as possible. And our website will always give you sort of realistic distances you might expect at 4K or 1080p, and with different types, you know, Cat 5, Cat 5e, Cat 6, blah, blah, blah. So again, check the website if you need the full distances. But this is a range of 5-play products.
So what we do there really is if we'll either tell you 4K at, or if we don't tell you, it's based on a 1080p 60 hertz signal. So I know a lot of manufacturers might tell you that that certain ones can go certain distance and they're a little bit longer than ours perhaps, but that's probably only, well, that is only at like 480i or 480p. So they're telling you can go longer, but actually not actually at the resolution you're likely to use. So all of our HDBaseT cable distances where you're not told exactly what resolutions they support will be based on 1080p 60 hertz, and then the 4K ones are always listed, because often with HDBaseT the distance drops when you're trying to push through 4K for obvious reasons, that there's a lot more bandwidth there.
Exactly right. Yeah, again, honesty is the best policy, as they say.
Absolutely.
So again, just an example here of some 5-play products. We have a range of point-to-point kits, just literally point-to-point, up to 100-meter kits. You've then got bottom left there, you can see a 1x7 distribution amplifier, which again we do in full HDBaseT. And you will see these sort of models as well, quite standard, but they do have HDMI in, a local HDMI output, in case you want to monitor locally or move on, send this onto another distribution amplifier, and then obviously your HDBaseT outputs as well. And on the right, again, you can see the newer chassis of the casings that we've spoken about. These again are designed for our RAX 300 series, and you'll notice these are PUV. These are then the slightly newer 48-volt models, and there's a very wide range of models that include, but again, we've just highlighted a couple. And then again, our range includes wall plate versions of many of our TXs.
Yeah, there's quite a few of those as well, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, the range, we have done a separate webinar on HDBaseT on its own, and that covers a much wider range. So we'll maybe try and link that when we upload this to YouTube. But again, just a highlights reel today.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
1600 series, again, we won't go too in depth because we have covered this in our meeting rooms webinar and also our HDBaseT webinar, but this range is ever growing. It's a wide range that can be mixed and matched. You can basically pick your receiver and transmitter to make the best system for you. All of these models work the opposite way to HDBaseT as it normally would. So normal HDBaseT, you'll send the power from the transmitter, the TX, across to the RX, the receiver. These ones work the other way around. So you're actually powering the receiver and sending that power back to the transmitter. These are designed with meeting rooms and huddle spaces in mind. You'll see that as we go through the specs in the next couple of pages. There are, again, wall plate versions available. And the range is increasing. I think it's up to about 12, maybe even 13 models now. So the list on the left is just a few of them, but there are more and more because this is a very popular range. And compatibility with certain presentation switches, which we'll actually see in part 2 of this overview webinar series, which is next Tuesday. Let's have a look at a really simple system from the 1600 series. So this is the 1630 TTX, which is the tabletop unit you see on the bottom right hand side here. Obviously tabletop design, no need for separate power because it's receiving its power from the receiver. So if this is mounted on a desk or a meeting space of some sort, it only has to have a cat cable to it. So it's really simple to position the tabletop unit.
Yeah, and if you do, you might have limited power in that area, and if you do, you probably want that for the people in the meeting rooms, plug in laptops, and so even where you might have some local power, you don't necessarily want to use it. And of course, the RX is always going next to the screen, and there'll always be power there. So it's a very useful system for these meeting rooms and huddle spaces.
Exactly right. So there is auto switching on this as well. So between the VGA and the two HDMI inputs. And as you can see on the front of the unit there, this does support LAN serving, which could work either way. But traditionally like this, if you've connected your RX to your local area network, then effectively this is working as a local port for your network. So again, in a meeting room space where maybe somebody doesn't have your Wi-Fi code, they could just
you don't really want them to have it, so they can still just go directly wired in. I mean, exactly, you can use it the other way when you're using different units in the 1600 range, but commonly that's how it's set up. And indeed, that's how it's set up in our meeting space at our offices as well.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I've used that myself a couple of times just to get a hardwired connection.
Yeah, yeah.
And this unit as well, so the TX can send out CEC or RS-232 commands, such as screen on. So, Kev, do you want to quickly run through that?
Yeah, so the idea here is to create a simple automation system that can be set up once by the installer, very simple to do, and you can use either CEC or RS-232. So if it's a standard screen that has CEC support, so you can do things like when you connect a source to the unit, it will turn your TV on and switch it to the right channel. And then when you remove your signal, it will auto switch to the next one, or if you put a new one in, it will auto switch to the next one. But then you can set a timer, and you can set a timer on all these functions. You can set a timer for like a minute. So if there's no signal being reintroduced to the TX in a minute or so, then it will then send a CEC message to the TV to turn it off, or an RS-232 message to your projector to turn it off. So from the point of view of the user, you literally just go in, plug in your laptop, have your meeting, plug around, everybody plugs in, shows what they want, pull it all out, put it on your arm, walk out, safely knowing that in a minute or two, depending how you've set it, the TVs will turn off again, or the projectors will turn off again. So great functionality, very simple to use. This is sort of the base level of the automation in this 1600 series range.
We sort of said, haven't we, really, maybe huddle spaces or a really simple meeting room.
Yeah.
But again, it looks nice, it works really effectively, and just makes the end user, again, plug it in and off it goes. That's how your screen's on. It's brilliant. Looking at what we've paired it with in this example, you could put this with a really standard receiver, no problem. But we've actually chosen in this example to put it with a model with a built-in amplifier. So again, as we mentioned earlier on, it's a nice compact receiver with a 20-watt stereo amplifier built into it. So you don't have to have separate amplification with this simple example. So again, as we mentioned there, outputs on the back to run to a pair of local speakers. This RX, which is the 1620A RX, has a local HDMI input as well. So you could have something connected at the screen end up here, maybe a signage player or even some sort of wireless Apple TV or Google Chromecast or whatever it's called.
Yeah, that's, depending on what the company's policy is on what sort of phones they might give out. If people want to, if they're giving out Android-based phones, you can have some kind of Android dongle stuck in there, so you can directly stream to it. Or if it's Apple, you might have an Apple TV or something stuck in there. So again, you can, if you want to show something from your phone or even a tablet or something, you can share it very easily. So if you sort of bring your own devices, just connect things into there. So it's very useful to have that available, that local input that's permanent to the system. You may also want to put some kind of digital signage if it's a more corporate space where you've got people running around, or it's an open space like a hotel. You might want to have your own corporate logos and identities rolling through there as well with some kind of signage player.
Exactly right, exactly right. And we have highlighted here as well, this receiver has relay outputs, which can then be combined with selected models from the 1600 series to help control additional things like blinds and projector lifts and all sorts. But again, just adding flexibility to the system. And as we've mentioned a few times now, this could pair sort of either of these with pretty much any of the rest of the range.
Yeah,
So
the whole 1600 range is basically a mix and match. It's better than going to an old school sweet shop.
I love it. All right, so moving on, that was all of the, well, that was some of the 5-play full HDBaseT systems. We also have a range of products that are HDBaseT LITE, so slightly shorter transmission distance. They don't have the LAN serving, and they do tend to then be a slightly lower price point overall. And we put here, compared to 5-play, the main difference really, as I say, no LAN serving, and as we said here, distances up to 60 meters rather than up to 100 meters. And
indeed,
again,
this is where you classically see other manufacturers listing longer distances. So that 60 meters is 1080p, 60 hertz. So where you see other manufacturers maybe listing 70 meters, yeah, that's all brilliant if you're using 480p. You will get, and you get that with ours. But we like to give you the distance actually based on a normal signal you're actually using in 2020 rather than something you were using 15 years ago.
Very true, very true. Just as with the 5-play full HDBaseT versions, again, there are simple point-to-point kits, like the little 515 kit up here. We then still have distribution amplifiers as well, which is included. You can see here, we've got a 1x3 and a 1x7, which you see on screen. And then you've got over here, again, light models, but these are the PUV 48 volt. So again, as you see, they're in that newer housing. And then models like this, even in the light versions, this is now a multi-format transmitter with USB-C input as well. This has been added to the range within about the last 2 months or so. So again, HDBaseT LITE, but this then has additions like USB-C input, display port, and also some basic automation, I think you said before, haven't you, Kev, with this one?
Yeah, it's got, and it's also got auto conversion as well. So what a lot of these products do, where they have lots of input types of HDMI, DisplayPort, and USB-C, so the digital side of it normally. So you could be using a source that might output something that is beyond the base specification of HDBaseT. So the base specification is 10.2 gigabits, which is about 9 gigabits for video and audio. So if you put in something like 4K 6444, this is 17 point blah 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 gigabits per second, and so it's beyond HDBaseT bandwidth. And so with a lot of systems, a lot of manufacturers, if you do that in a system, then you're just not going to get a picture on the other side. Not with CYP, what happens is all of these have some kind of auto conversion going on. So the system realizes that the bandwidth incoming to it is beyond HDBaseT bandwidth and will do some kind of automatic conversion. So no need for anybody to touch or do anything. So if you throw in 4K 6444, then some conversion will happen, either maybe converting the hertz rate, so dropping the 60 hertz down to 30 hertz, or maybe doing a 444 color space conversion to a 422 with some chroma subsampling, or even just a basic scaling change from 4K down to 1080p. The overall idea of this is whatever you put in, you get something out at the other end without the user having to do anything. So very, very useful functionality, and does save a lot of those call outs.
Yeah, good to avoid disappointment, isn't it? That's
Indeed.
A great feature. So in fact, this actually covers what you just mentioned then, really, about the HDBaseT having a 10.2 gigabits per second bandwidth limitation. And either you're going to have to use some sort of conversion, as Kev just said, to get it over the signal, or you can then use clever technology like we've got AVLC, which is our adaptive visually lossless compression. So if if the system requires 4K HDR, this is the way to go. Do you want to touch on that as well, Kev?
Yeah, so the idea of this is that we have employed a compression chip on either side, so before on the TX and after on the RX, to compress the signal ever so slightly. This is visually lossless. You may have seen this at many shows over the years. We've demonstrated this on similar screens, and it's incredibly difficult to tell the difference. In fact, it's almost impossible to tell the difference realistically. And so this allows you to actually pass it pretty much identical quality, and certainly, doesn't visually look any worse quality, these higher rate 6G 4K signals over a standard HDBaseT system. So look for the AVLC in our marketing and on the product codes, and these are the products that can do the 4K 6444 and the 4K HDR. This includes the common HDR settings you get from games consoles as well. So the 4K 6420 HDR, the 10 and 12-bit that you get from PS4 Pros and Xbox One X's and things like that.
And you know, because you had to test them, which was very hard.
I occasionally have to sit and play a game to make sure
just to make sure, in case anything changed overnight.
Yep.
Let's moving on. So again, this will then cover, it's basically, there are still light versions of this and full versions of this. Again, with those key differences, longer distance on full, and the ability to pass Ethernet through the full HDBaseT versions. And again, this is literally what we've covered here. So HDBaseT standard up to 10.2, HDBaseT with AVLC, then allowing up to 18 gigabits per second maximum, which we've covered. But again, as I mentioned, there are light versions available, like here, the PUV 1710 LTRX and RX, which are HDBaseT with AVLC, but in light. And then you have the full fat equivalent, which is then obviously longer distance and the LAN serving. All of these you'll see are in the slightly newer casings. And then if you need either a slimline option or you need something with an optical audio return path, as in bringing audio back from the receiver to the transmitter, then we have our 1830 and 1730 models.
So these are based on our own proprietary optical audio return system. So when we were developing these, we looked at possibly using ARC, but actually it was incredibly, well, not necessarily just sort of unreliable. It's difficult to set up in a multi-room system. So if you have to then have CEC on everything, and you can get sort of CEC cross messaging. And I think we all know, and in fact, HDMI themselves are developing a new version of the ARC that doesn't rely on CEC messages for this exact reason, because even they recognize that it's far from a perfect system. It's fine in a single room, you know, sources into an AVR up to a TV, ARC going back to the AVR, fine, simple. But in multi-room settings, where a lot of these 1830s and 1730s are used with our larger matrices, there's a multi-room, that never was going to be reliable, and you're going to get odd CEC messaging. So we developed our own system, and this is again where, you know, strictly speaking, having an audio return channel from the RX, so plug the TV's optical into the RX, it sends it back down the same cat cable and kicks it out at the other end, so you can connect it to AVRs at the head end. So this is not actually, strictly speaking, part of the HDBaseT base specification, but because of our knowledge and use of these chips over many years, we're basically tweaking or overclocking them slightly to get this extra bandwidth to allow us to feed this signal back. So incredibly useful in larger matrixing systems where you want to get the TV from the audio, for the TV's audio back, or in commercial environments where you want to be able to manage the audio coming back because all your amplifiers are in one location centralized.
Superb. It's superb.
And those are the same, those versions are available in HDBaseT, HDBaseT LITE, HDBaseT AVLC, and HDBaseT LITE AVLC as well. So they're across the PUV range. There's one of those for each one.
Fantastic. Exactly right. And again here with that AVLC support, as in it can handle things like 4K HDR, is a 1x4 distribution amplifier, which, if I remember correctly, is on the next page. No, it's not. That's the other presentation. I'll look at it here. Very useful. We find these are very popular with things like high-end hi-fi and television outlets, retail outlets, where they want to send one high-quality HDR source, for example, to multiple televisions to obviously display them so customers can buy them. So this is a 1-input, 4-output unit that also, as I say, handles that AVLC. So a really nice way to pass very high quality images to actually 5 screens, because there's a local HDMI output as well. And this is a light product. So this would send realistically up to about 35 meters, would you say, Kev?
Yeah, or 40 meters if you're using really good Cat 6A, Cat 7 sort of stuff.
Super. Super duper. So as I say, again, a nice wide range if you need that higher bandwidth support, essentially, for things like 4K HDR.
Indeed, indeed.
In a nutshell, I will just show you there's a few ranges here. Again, we're not going to go in detail, but we have the 1200 series, which is an HDBaseT LITE range of products. Then got the 1500 series, which, as you can see, has a wider range of models, including TXs with a local HDMI output and RXs with a local HDMI input and audio embedding and de-embedding. Just wider choice of models in the 1500 series, which is full HDBaseT. 1600 series, which we've looked at, key thing there is that they have that reverse power and you can mix and match those products. 1700 series, which is the LITE AVLC that we've just spoken about. And then you've got its full fat bigger brother, which is then the 1800 series. PUV 2000 series, which are HDBaseT 2. And if you look at here, the 2010 models, they then support USB data as well, which is useful for touchscreens and interactive displays.
So that USB is part of the core functionality of HDBaseT 2, but also there's an extra error correction system in the HDBaseT 2 technology that isn't in the HDBaseT 1 technology. So sometimes if you've got a noisy environment or electric, EMI interference and you're using HDBaseT 1, if you change over to an HDBaseT 2 kit, you might solve those problems because it has this extra PAM-based error correction system within it.
Fantastic. And then sitting right at the top there is a bit of a combination of a few of these. It's HDBaseT 2. It also has the AVLC technology for the 4K HDR support. And the 2100 series here actually are the models designed specifically for our Mod X1616, our modular matrix, which we will look at in just a moment.
Indeed.
Quickly touching then on matrices. Again, these are models with AVLC. There are some standard sort of 3G models as well, but these are the sort of 6G AVLC matrices. So we have a standard 4x4 matrix, which comes as a kit with the LITE receivers as well. And the nice thing with this, as well as having AVLC for supporting things like 4K HDR, 2 of the HDBaseT outputs actually have automatic downscaling. So if the application is a mixture of 1080p and 4K screens, you could actually run a mixture of 2 and 2 because 2 of the outputs would automatically downscale, which is quite a nice feature of these.
A lot of times you might have a TV, maybe it's in a bathroom or something like that, that isn't 1080, that isn't 4K compatible, doesn't have full 4K compatibility. And so that this auto downscale, that it is automatic, it's based on an edit read from the screen telling the matrix the capabilities of the screen. But you do have commands within Telnet and RS-232 to force this on and off in case you've got, you do get occasionally EDID corruption within screens. So there is commands to turn this from auto to off or to on as required.
Fantastic.
And that's the same for anything with the auto downscale within the matrix range.
Wonderful. And a model we did mention earlier, which is then the 1082 Pro, which again supports AVLC, and this then has slightly more advanced, well, we'll look at the back actually in a second. Here we go. So in fact, Kev, yeah, do you want to go through this with the audio matrix and all those sort of bits?
So this is the flagship matrix. There is standard LITE and standard full HDBaseT versions, and then there's this HDBaseT Pro version, which is basically the AVLC version of this. So it has the 18 gigabits per second, 4K 444 and HDR support. But as you see from the back of it, it's not just designed as a video, an HDMI video and audio matrix. It's designed to be a complete solution that provides audio-only zones and audio-only inputs and outputs. And so the whole thing is completely configurable as far as the audio and videos. So any audio input, for example, even an audio input from an HDMI, could be routed to any output, whether that's the HDBaseT output, the analog audio output, the digital audio outputs, or the CAT audio outputs that we demonstrated a little bit earlier down here somewhere. Where are they? There they are. Oh yes, to you with the pointer, brilliant. So those go to those PU 305s we spoke about earlier. So you've got lots of configuration on this as well, so you can set it up for audio-only zones or have reinforcement zones. So the analog outputs there are designed to primarily mirror the HDBaseT outputs, but they can be used independently. And then you have 4 extended analog audio outputs that can be used for audio only zones, and then 8 different audio inputs plus the cat audio inputs and outputs. So you couple that together with the HDBaseT configuration of either 4K 3G with conversion for the older models, and 4K 6G compatibility with these models, and you've got a really flexible system. The system can also be set up very easily, so everything just follows everything else. So, you know, you don't need to make multiple selections. You can just set up that when you select, you know, input 5 on output 4, it's taking the video from the HDMI, but the audio from here. But the same input 5 on and output 1, could be taking the audio and video from HDMI. So it's completely flexible how you use it as well. So it's incredibly impressive, and there's no need for a secondary audio only matrix system when you use these.
And this would of course pair nicely then with models with OAR, the receivers with OAR as well.
So a very common thing to do here is, you know, you can just set up. So basically when you go into the HDBaseT outputs, it's going to a TV or a projector. So you can actually just connect the OAR and set the system to always listen to the OAR. So it doesn't matter what's on the TV, you'll always get the audio returning back and being pumped out of this matrix into your amplifiers at the head end, at the control end. And this allows you to then, when you switch within the TV to maybe Netflix or Prime or whatever other streaming services, you can be guaranteed that you'll get the audio back through the system, even though you're no longer looking at the HDBaseT throughput from the system. You're looking at the local streaming services on the TV. You'll still get that audio back through to the matrix and out to the amplifiers in the central location. So very, very versatile. And once you do that, you can just leave it on that setting and literally just change the HDMI video channels.
Superb. And again, this one actually then supports independent downscaling on all HDBaseT outputs.
That's absolutely right, Dan. All 8 HDBaseT outputs have that when required. So obviously this is a 6G, so it's only needed when there is a 1080p screen. But again, it's quite common for there to be one. Maybe in a kid's room you've got an older one, or as I said, a bathroom or a gym, you're using an older one, and you don't want to have to make everything in your system 1080p because you've got one 1080p screen in your system, and you don't really want to have to connect extra products at the end and muck about with them. So this auto downscaling will manage this for you without you need to do anything. And as I say, you still have the commands if you do have a problem, like, as I say, sometimes edits can be corrupted and that can cause a problem, and so you can independently turn it off and on or put it to auto as it comes out of the box.
Superb. And then there's the little MA421, which is small in size but big in features. So that's the 4-input 2-zone output matrix, again with support for AVLC. This comes as a kit, as you see on screen there, the matrix, the remote, and one receiver, which would be again HDBaseT LITE. So you'll be looking at realistically up to sort of 35, 40 meters with that supplied RX. You get the idea on screen here that, as I say, it's a 4-input, but with 2 zone outputs. Although we can see on here, zone A is actually an HDMI output and a mirrored HDBaseT. So these will both be showing the same image. So you could, as we've indicated here, maybe have the local HDMI output to your main screen, which might be in a lounge, and then a mirrored output to a second room. And then you've got the zone B, which is then your independent output, which again is an HDBaseT output and could then go to feed a totally separate zone. Now, this does have a built-in stereo 20-watt amplifier again, a common theme. A lot of our products now do. So you can power local speakers. Probably you just put them again, as we said, in the main zone with the matrix.
Yeah, maybe some bookshelves or something similar.
Exactly, yeah. Again, this has that automatic downscaling on the HDBaseT outputs. So again, you're taking that hassle out of installing it into a property. As I said, built-in stereo 20-watt amplifier. You can then download free of charge, of course, the CYP control app. So this can control all the matrix functionality, as in your switching, your volume and things like that. but also you can use IR learning and learn your remote controls, like a Sky Q remote or some sort of Blu-ray player remote.
Yeah,
or
so
something
essentially
like
it gives you control of all the sources in the system and all the TVs in the system. So from one place, and also that's kind of mapped. It can't be 100%, but it's also mapped onto the remote, the physical remote as well. So you can do a lot of the controlling of sources and TVs from the physical remote that's supplied with the unit as well.
Exactly right. Really, really simple to use. You can see on screen there, actually, you've got all the Blu-ray transport functions. And along the bottom there, you've got things like the volume for the matrix itself and audio switching. So yeah, very, very simple to use. Really nice app. And again, just to look at the back of the unit there, you can see there is the RS-232 functionality, the stereo amplifier outputs as well, a separate line output, and then obviously the control as well.
Yeah, the controls, that's where you put your LAN in so you can get access to the web GUI where you configure all this and can capture and test IR commands as well through there.
Fantastic. And then I think actually this is the final model we look at today before we go on to part 2, which is then next week. So you've then got right at the very top end a modular matrix 16 by 16. Our mods in the past used to be in boards of 8. So this would have been one board along the top there, for example. For increased flexibility this year, the Mod X includes boards of 4 inputs. So currently that would include HDMI and HDBaseT input boards, and HDMI and HDBaseT output boards, and you can get an idea of the configuration here. And that's a lovely kit, isn't it, Kev? It's HDBaseT2, AVLC, the whole lot.
Incredibly high-grade pieces of equipment, really. The actual chassis is designed with a hell of a lot of bandwidth throughput to it, and it's designed in fully HDBaseT2 across the entire input and output structure for the HDBaseT cards as well, which offers that extra error correction and extra distance with 4K as well. So HDBaseT2 can go the full 100 meters with 4K, whereas HDBaseT1 cannot. So yes, very, very lovely.
Yeah, exactly. Fantastic. And designed, as we've said on there, to work with the 2100 receivers. So again, yeah, just a great piece of kit overall.
And strictly speaking, it's always a +1 because the control board has an HDMI input and output that are actually completely usable. The idea behind it is that, you know, as the installer, you can quickly test with this input and output and have a local screen, but actually you can use it as an input and output across the whole system. So the input can be taken to every output, and the output could be used locally as well for monitoring.
Fantastic, fantastic. And yeah, as I thought, so end of part 1. It's like watching Back to the Future or something. Next week, you can be Doc, I'll be Marty.
I'll have to get my wig.
Go for it. That'll be a good sight.
Maybe Eric can be Doc.
Oh, you never know. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, Eric, join us next week. Fantastic. Yeah, so thank you. As I say, it was literally a bit of a look. I know a lot of that was HDBaseT, but you've looked at the audio products. And next week, we'll be looking at other models like presentation switches, some of the testing products. We've got AV over IP, 1 gig and 10 gig SDBOE. We've also then got things like our streaming products next week. So there's a lot in our range. And as I say, we just thought we'd try and bring to everyone a bit of a look at a bit of all of them, really. So, yeah.
Remember that if you want to look at some products in more details, we've done many webinars on bespoke products and different ranges within our product portfolio. So if you want to have a look, you can join us on some of those webinars, or in fact, they're all over our YouTube channel. They've been recorded so you can see them and view them at your own leisure.
Exactly right, exactly right. But that is it for today. Any questions, Kev? I probably not.
No, we're all good there. I've done a fantastic job and they're all done.
You always do. I'm not surprised.